guess that's fine. All right, 3, nope, 1, there it is. Okay. So first, let me turn off all my layers just so we can focus on the couple things at a time. So number one, I was having an issue with the texture using the texturize command. The reason that my texture, if you remember, my texture was kind of swimming, so that if I had my, let's say I have a shape, nope, click off view. Let's say I have a shape here, and then I went to the stylize texture eyes. I picked one of my textures, not that one. There we go. And where are you at? There you are. I'm going to make this 3D. And then what happens is, as my camera's moving, I turn my camera off. There we go. As my camera's moving, that texture is basically staying in place while everything else is moving. Okay, so that texture should be moving with the camera too. And the reason that that's happening is because I have that continuously rasterize button clicked. If I unclick it, everything becomes really grainy. So in this case, that texturize command didn't work. Yes, sir?
Is there any reason that when you press continuously rasterize, your layer would disappear?
Just because it's reading something else of where it's at. So if I continuously rasterize something, like let's say my clouds here, with this off, well, I guess this one doesn't really do it. Let me just switch to my bounce platform. There we go. Nope, I guess none of mine do it. Sometimes it will, based on where it's at inside Illustrator. It shouldn't move away. It shouldn't like disappear totally. It may be just over here or over there. It shouldn't totally disappear. So if that does happen, we'll have to look at it and see why it's happening. So the fix for this is that this is my bounce platform, this is my texture. I put my texture below my bounce platform. So I wanted my this image here, which is cut off, to be the texture for my bounce platform. So I put it below my bounce platform. I set the track matte to alpha for the bounce platform. So this is what it looks like normal, like that. And then I set this to alpha matte, the bounce platform, so it cuts it out. They're both 3D, they're both at the same level, so now it moves with it. Now what that does, though, is it cuts out the exact shape of it, giving me the exact color of my texture. I don't want that. I want to use a texture closer to what I originally had. So if I go to my bounce platform and I turn it back on, and I change this to multiply in this case, it turned out pretty good that it gave it pretty close to the same color. Here's the original color. This is it with the multiply. Okay, now I could have gone through different modes. Maybe I want to try add, that's way too bright. Maybe color burn, that's way too dark. Maybe screen. You know, you can go through and play with a lot of them. I just find that multiply, for the most part, works as a pretty good solution for that. Depending on what colors you have, you may want to choose a different one, okay? So for each one of my areas that I have a texture, I have an image, and then I've used that alpha matte. Here's my Pantheon bottom. And here is my mountains. There it is. And you'll see how much better the textures will look having this kind of thing in there. I'm not sure if I have a, what's that? Composition where I don't have those in here. Maybe 0, 1. No, it is 0, 1. I'll just drop my artwork down here just so you can see what it looked like before. Background, yes. And mountains, 1, 2, 3. So these are what my mountains look like before. They look pretty boring. And now they actually have some texture on top of them. Now, one thing you'll also find that when you do this kind of thing, your texture may be too big and you want to shrink it down to get a nice fit on it. So on each one of my textures, I added a couple things. One of them was this Reptile. Basically, it's a plugin or effect, you can search under effects and find Reptile in there. It allows you to take your texture and repeat it left and right. Okay, so when your texture stops here, this thing will go on forever. So if I isolate just this one mountain here, there it is, and I turn that Reptile off, you'll see that that texture is no longer on it. As I turn this on, it allows me to repeat that texture over and over and over again, which means I can then go to my actual texture and scale it to whatever I want. If I want a bigger texture on my mountains, I make it bigger. If I'm looking for something smaller and more defined, I can do that. Now this is where I would get into this area of having, this blankness here where the texture is not repeating, and I could just say expand down and just expand this further down. And now I have a tight texture that looks really nice. And I set it to unfold because unfold basically is like, here's my texture, and then the next copy would be like this, and then the next copy would be a mirror image. So every time it duplicates it, it's creating a mirror image of it. If I have it on repeat, and I did this too many times, I would get like chunks where it would actually look like blocks of textures and not just like one nice smooth texture across the area. Okay? Again, don't look at mine as the only way to do it. This is just a way to do it. Okay? And then I also added a levels to the texture just to adjust it a little bit. And then I did that for all the mountains. And you can see how much nicer this looks compared to just having flat colors on your stuff. Depending on the kind of texture you would put on each one of these is up to you. It's just a matter of what you want them to look like. You could actually get something, if you found like a good cardboard texture and you put that on there, everything could look like actually like cardboard pieces laying inside your scene, which would look really cool. You add a drop shadow to that, or you add a bevel emboss to it, now it feels like it has some thickness too, right? So there's a lot you can do to make these things look better and better. So that's how I corrected my texture stuff. For my clouds, I wanted to have some sort of atmosphere inside here. So I didn't want this to be just like plain, boring, flat. I wanted to have some presence of clouds in my scene. So there's a couple things you can do. You can go to YouTube, and people have free videos of clouds on YouTube. Free cloud, black screen. This is what you would want, is clouds on a black screen. And if it says free black screen stock footage, verify where it's coming from. I see no reason why that wouldn't be free. Okay? Holy cow. Now this one I probably wouldn't use because it's very it's like stuttery. It's not like smooth clouds, so this one I wouldn't want to use. That's the one I clicked on. This is smoke, so I wouldn't want smoke. That looks weird for my specific scene. Here's one on a green screen. You might be able to use something like that too. It's just a matter of playing with it. If you're trying to download stuff from YouTube, the quickest way that I do it is just go to the start of YouTube and type in 2 S's. SS YouTube. And then this will allow you to, sure. This one doesn't have the link found, but typically they would have a link found, and then you would download the biggest file that they have there. Okay, so that didn't have it. Now, these clouds I just made on my own. There's 10 different ways to make clouds. I'm going to show you the way that I made mine. Okay, so I went to a new composition, 960 by 540, longer than my current composition, so 10 seconds. And then I just added a single layer, and then I just went to noise, where you at? And then there's a couple in here you could play with. There's fractal noise, there's regular noise. I believe I used turbulent noise for this one. And then I played with this. I think I went to smooth. No, I didn't go to smooth. Oops. I went to cloud. There it is, cloudy. There it is. And I think I went to spline on this. It's subtle, but it's there. Obviously, blocky looks like that. Linear looks like this. So I went to that, and then I just played with my settings here. Okay, so I don't know. Let's say something like that. This is way too much. That doesn't look like clouds at all. So this whole process works because I'm going to layer layers on top of each other, and that's what's going to make the clouds. So I'm going to go to my shapes here, and I'm just going to draw in some random masks, like so. Now I know for my specific scene, I don't care what the bottom looks like. I want the top to look really soft, okay? So that's why the bottom here I'm kind of covering, but the top I'm staying away from too much. Or not too much, but pretty far away. So that should be good there. I could have drawn another shape out. That would have been fine too. Now I'm going to go into my mask, and I'm going to feather all of this. And instead of this being on red, I'm going to go to my solid settings for this layer and just put this on, I think white should be good. Yes, white's good. Okay. So now that gives me the start of my clouds. I'm going to go to my opacity. I'm going to take this down to, like, let's say 50%. Okay, really soft. I'm only going to use like this much of it, so that should be good. I'm going to set this to, I don't know, maybe screen. And then I'm just going to duplicate it and offset it a little bit. Duplicate it and offset it a little bit. And maybe I'll scale up this one because I don't like how that seam is there. Or this one, there it is. Okay, so now that looks more like a cloud field, like if there's fog on the bottom. Now, none of this moves right now. So if I hit play, none of this is going to move. There is an evolution control. Let me go to my very top one here. Let me turn these other ones off so we can see it. I'll even make the background black so it's a little bit more obvious. If I go to this evolution here, you'll see how the clouds are then kind of morphing. It's not just like static. So again, that is something else I could animate. I could just alt-click on that and say equals time, and then hit play. That's way too slow. Time times 20. You could set keyframes too. It's just, like I've talked about before, I just like to do it the quickest way. That's good. So now I can just copy this expression, alt-click on all of these, and then paste that in there. And I could have different settings too. Oops, that's the wrong one. I could have maybe one moves faster than another one or whatever. There we go. So now once I put all these together, there's my cloud bank. And we can see some subtle moving that's happening inside here. The idea with this is not, I don't want it to go crazy. I could also animate these things moving across the screen. So I could take, let's say this cloud bank, make this a bit bigger. Pull it down some. And I'll just set a keyframe here at the beginning, go to the end, move it over a little bit. And I'll do that to all of these. I'll just set position keyframes at the beginning, go to the end of this, and then just kind of move them over some. Keep grabbing the same one. There we go. Now on all of these, I probably need to scale them up just a bit more. There you go. So now I have something that feels more like it's moving. Again, it's subtle, it's not going crazy, but it is definitely looks like it's moving some. Okay. Then what I did is I just dropped that composition into my Angry Bird composition. So here's my somewhere composition. There it is. Oh, there's my old one. Comp 2. I just dropped this into here. I made it a 3D layer, and then I just moved it so that it was in front of my stuff. And you can see how effective that is. That's like pretty perfect. Oops, don't move the mountains. If I needed to adjust any of this stuff, like sometimes you may get like you can see the seams, or the top is still visible. You might see a line. So I could even drop on top of this another mask and then go to the feathering for the mask and feather that out and then maybe scale this up. So now again, it just makes that a little bit softer so we don't see it. I could also go to the opacity on this and knock the opacity down if I'm not liking how that's looking. And now it's nice and subtle. Okay. Now I did 2 of these. Let me call this clouds. I did one kind of in front, like in front of the platform here, so it looked like there were clouds. And then I duplicated it and I shoved it behind this. Let me turn these ones off. I shoved it behind the stuff so that I had maybe another layer of clouds like way in the back. So now I have basically just like this atmosphere up close where I can see clouds, but then way in the back it's even cloudier. If you've ever seen like a foggy day, up close it's obviously cloudy, but really far out it's very difficult to see. So this is where you can create some really cool kind of blending features with your stuff. So everything isn't just like a mountain, a cloud, this or that or whatever. Everything kind of blends together a lot nicer, okay? So that's the clouds, that's the texture part. I animated these clouds moving. I literally just set a position keyframe at the beginning, went to the end and set a position keyframe. Again, subtle. I don't want someone to notice the clouds are moving. I want them to have to look for it because that's what makes it work. If someone has to look for it, then it's like, okay, well they wanted that to not be as noticeable. I'll set a keyframe here for this. I went to the end. It makes sense to move all the clouds the same direction. Typically clouds don't move like different directions. So if you look at that, this cloud is barely moving. Okay, now if I go here and there, you can definitely see that cloud moving because of the distance between these two. Maybe I'll exaggerate it a little bit more. There we go. And I even duplicated my clouds and changed their Z position and adjusted their animation, and I think I even rotated them around some. That was too far back because it was behind the background. There we go. Just needs to be able to rotate a little bit more so it doesn't look so much like the same one. Maybe even scaled up some. Whoop. Just pokes through. There you go. There you go. So now you can see it's a bit more subtle because of how they're moving. And I typically wouldn't have 2 clouds that look exactly the same right next to each other. Typically one's on one side of the screen, one's on the other, just so they look different, okay? That's those guys. I also found a free video of a bird under my movies, under here. So this is the bird that's flying in the background, free green screen HD. There's actually 2 videos in here. This one is about 20 seconds or so, yep, and then it starts right at about 5 seconds. So if I want this in my scene, I'm going to drag this into my scene. I'm going to scale it down so I can see it. There it is. And then I'm just going to double click it and then start cutting it up. So I know at 5 seconds it would start. At about 20 seconds it ends. This is plenty of time for an animation, but the bird moves very slow. Like this is, it seems like, there's audio to it too. It seems like maybe the bird's gliding, or maybe they shot this with like slow motion. It looks like slow motion because that's like incredibly slow. Or this is CG because those wings are really, really crisp. So what I need to do is I'm going to close this. I need to extract the bird off the background. So there's a couple tools to do it. My favorite one I use is under keying, and it's called Keylight. It's pretty much the most straightforward one. And any piece of green screen footage you have, you can start with Keylight and go from there. I drop it on as an effect. I click my screen color. So it basically wants to know are you using a blue screen, a green screen, a yellow screen, a whatever screen. And then I just click it. I'm using green. Pretty much it's done. You can see like the green is gone. There is a little bit of a halo around the bird, but if I go to my screen matte, there it is, and I go to screen shrinker grow, and I put in a negative number like -2, you'll see that it shrinks in that edge ever so slightly. And that is pretty much all I need to do for that one. The bird's way in the distance. He's not going to be seen for most of this. Again, it's just a subtle thing happening in the background. So I don't need to worry about too much detail in there. So that works pretty good. Then I'm going to go to my position, make sure he's 3D, put him way in the distance, because that's where he should be, way back here. Get him the right scale, so if he's way back there, obviously he's not bigger than the Pantheon, so I'll scale him down so that it fits better. This is different times, so I have, it could be a giant monster. And I'm actually going to leave him. I like him this size because he reads really well. If he's too small, it's like, what's that dot flying in the background? So it could be because this is Spartan times. They have different creatures back then, maybe. So I'll just keep him that size. And I actually want him to fly out from behind a mountain. So I'm going to make sure I push him back even further. So he is behind those mountains there. There we go. So I'm going to go here to position. I'm going to go to the end. And then go that way. I'll actually fly him behind this other mountain. There we go. And then this is, again, one of those things you want to look at for speed because he could just like zip across, and that's way too fast, right? It should look natural. Now, he doesn't look like he's moving at all. He's pretty much lined up with the camera. Like as fast as my camera is moving, that's how fast the bird is moving. And that looks very weird, especially for his speed. His speed is pretty much slow too. Like you can see some movement, but it's still, it doesn't look right. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to click on this button at the bottom. This right here is, it'll open up this thing that allows us to adjust the speed of whatever we have. So if I say stretch this to, let's say, 25%, it'll take that animation and it'll compress it to 25%. So now that bird is going to move a lot faster. Okay? So now if I hit play, okay, now it looks like, again, he's moving maybe too fast. You can see it's like zooming straight across. So I'm actually going to flop it. What was that?
It looks like an Apache helicopter going through the sky right there.
Right. So I'm going to take my keyframes and reverse them so that he starts off at the right side and goes to the left. Okay. Something in the background moving the other way, have a little bit of contrast. It's going a different direction. He's like stuck there though. Let's make him move a little bit further. Let's scoot him further over this way so he's out of the view. And maybe I'll even just cut it right there. There we go. So that doesn't look too horrible. Maybe I'll pull this up. Make sure he doesn't swap to the other bird. He does, I think. Let's see. Nope, he's good. Okay. That's good. And what else did I want to do to that? Oh, I also want to rotate him because he's facing the wrong direction. So he's still facing the right. So I'm going to rotate him around in the Y direction. There he goes. So now again, it's just something subtle in the background. With the clouds in there, with the mountains, it really will not be a huge thing having that there. I may even want to move him up a little bit because it looks weird him going straight across. So I'm going to go to my end keyframe. I'll move him up and move him over. There we go. Now once my angry bird is animated, in the other file he is, once he's animated, I'll also make sure that the bird and him don't conflict. So what I don't want to happen is my bird bounces and my Angry Bird bounces and this other bird like flies like right in the same direction as his head. That would look weird. I want it moved off so it looks like it's in the background. It's not like overlaying that other, the actual Angry Bird. Okay, I could also adjust maybe my handlebars or whatever. But there we go. All right, good enough for that. Cool. So everything else in there is pretty much stuff that we've already covered. Setting keyframes, moving things, cameras. We've already covered the rest of that. So once I had my stuff animated on this one, there it is. Let me turn all my layers back on, unmaster these. There's all of those. Okay, a lot of layers happening here. Let me turn this off and then just hit play. So you can see there's the bird in the background. There's my fog, there's my textures. His mouth is opening and closing also. And I timed each one of these so that they kind of made sense. As he's jumping up, the shield is kind of dragging behind. When he gets to the top, the shield comes up. As he's going down, the shield is kind of dragging behind him again. When he hits the ground, the shield kind of follows through that motion. Okay, so you'll see it's below him here. When he gets to the top of the peak, it's going to be back at the right spot. As he comes down, the shield's going to raise up a little bit. As he hits the ground, the shield's going to dip below it. And you'll see it kind of dragging again below him. The same thing with the spear. As he's coming up, the spear is moving up towards the top of him. When he hits the ground, it like flips down. I should add texture to this also, but for now it's good. Okay, so there we go. So there's the animation of the bird. Now just so you can see the keyframes for this, there's all my keyframes that I set on the bird. So here's his right pupil. Look at all the movement I have for this. Here's the right eyebrow. Here's his shield. There's his spear rotation, his beak opening, his squashing, his stretching, and his rotations and positions. Okay, again, I layered it. I didn't just go right into frame 1 and set it, and then frame 2, and then frame 3. I did his positions first, then I did his bounces, so it looked like the bounces were right. Then I did the rotations, then I did my squash and stretch, then I did all my pupils, and then shield, then spear rotation, and then his beak. Okay, so once I had all of this stuff set up, I took that composition, which was BG01, I drug it to a new composition, and then this is where I did all my sound effects for this. So for something like this, I wanted to have some sort of ambient sound, so something in the background, and then I wanted to have a sound effect for every time he hit the ground. I could have had more, like every time he hits the ground, you hear like a chink for like the spear hitting the ground. I could do that too, but it was maybe a little bit too much, okay? I wanted to keep it pretty simple. The best place to find stuff is Google, free sound effects. This is one that I will use, freesound.org. It's a free account. You're able to register, get a login, and then you can search for sounds and then download them and use them. When you're looking for sounds, the hardest part is describing the sound that you want to get. So for him hitting the ground, I could look for footsteps, but obviously I'm going to get footsteps, right? I'm going to get like high heels or something, or men walking. So the sound effect that I have, where's my audio? There it is. Hold on, where's my audio? Oh, I put it in movies. There it is. So this sound effect is actually running on ice. That's the sound effect. Okay, so it took a couple minutes to go through and find a good sound effect, but once I found like I want that crunch. That's what I wanted. Okay, so anything can work for a sound effect. Have you ever watched any of the Disney stuff where they show like the Foley artists, like here's them making the sound effects for all that stuff? It's like awesome. Right, like that crunching wooden fence, I could use that also for it. All I'm doing is looking for what sound connects what I'm seeing with what I want it to sound like. Like that one's probably too long for him to be like doing that. If he was walking on ice, this actually might be a really good one. See, that's footsteps. That doesn't sound good. Biting, crunching. That's weird because that sounds like biting and crunching. I wouldn't use that. So I could use maybe that first part. Like when it hits, it could just be like, that could work. Not too sharp. Maybe you stepped on a stick. No. Right? So I go through these and I find one that I like. On all of these, there will typically be some sort of attribution type thing here. Let me log in. Yes. There you go. So let's say that I want this sound here. Over here, it'll say it's licensed under Creative Commons 0 license. You can click that and read what that means. It means no copyright. The person associated with work has dedicated to work under the public domain by waiving all of his rights to the work fully. So that means that you can use this without having to pay her or anything. Now, this is important because if you were to go to a company and you start doing something, let's say you work on a commercial or something for the web, and you use a sound effect and someone recognizes that and they can prove you stole their sound effect, that can cost you your job in the company like a lot of money. So you always want to find good stuff. So you would download the sound effect. This one here is pretty long. All right. You can also look for ambient. Spell it right, ambient. And it might take you a few minutes to find one. This one's 8.5 minutes. I'm not even going to listen to that one. Keeping in mind that we have, in my case, I have about 10 seconds worth of animation. So I don't have a minute and a half to get into the sound. I need something that starts up pretty much right away, is nice, matches my imagery, and then gets out. Like that's way too much. That's a restaurant, so obviously it doesn't make sense. If I had something with water dripping, like a jungle or something, this one could work.
Like in a cave.
Or in a cave, yeah. Right, so go through, you find a sound, and then it just imports into After Effects like anything else. File import, find your file. You can pretty much guess which folder I put all my audio in, which folder I put all my movies in. So my bird is in my movies folder, my audio is in my audio folder. Keep them separated like that. My textures are in my artwork folder. Then I bring it down. So here's my ice, I brought it down. If I double click the L key, it'll show me what the wave file looks like. That's what my crunches look like. I don't want all of those crunches because that's not going to make sense. If I hit play, that doesn't make sense. I need to sync up the sound effect to what I want to happen, okay? So what I do first, Adobe has a program called Audition. I have a video on my YouTube page where I go through Audition. You can definitely check it out or just look at it. It's really good. Typically, I'll go into Audition to chop stuff up. Because this is a class, a lot of people just want to like, what do I need to do to get this? I just do it here. So this is my first crunch. If you look at the peaks, crunches are basically like nothing, a sound, and then nothing. So wherever I have that peak, that's my sound. Wherever I have nothing, that's it kind of trailing off. So I'm going to go to about here, which is before the start of this one. There's a little bit of a lull right there. And I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to say Split the Layer, Control-Shift-D. And what that does, I'm going to turn off this layer, is it gives me one crunch. Right? One crunch. That's all I have right there. I'm going to go back to this layer. I'm going to go to the middle of this crunch, and I'm going to hit the asterisk key to indicate this is where the crunch happens. Okay? I want the little part before, I want the part after, but I want to know exactly where that starts so that when he hits the ground, that's what I'm going to use to sync up my stuff to. Okay? If I were to just cut this, it might sound weird because there's no like build up to it. Doesn't sound bad, but I'm going to leave it the way it was. I'm going to go to this again. I hit L twice. Let's try that again. Oh, it's off. There we go. Turn it back on. Here's another crunch. So I'm going to go right before the next crunch. I'm going to edit split layer. Go to the peak of this one. Make sure I'm on this layer. Hit the asterisk. And now I have 2 crunches. Now for the one that I had, I only used 2. And I just alternated between the 2 crunches. You don't want to use the same sound effect every single time because it will be very obvious, okay? Maybe something if you were doing, I think someone's doing a Mario one, maybe in this class or the other one. If you're doing Mario, every time he jumps, it's the same sound effect. So that makes sense. I wouldn't need a different one. But for a lot of things, if you can make a variety of sound effects, even if they're just subtle changes, it makes a world of difference. So, oops, what happened to that one? There it is. Okay. So then I went and played through my animation. Okay, so there's no sound effect for him leaving the ground. Right? I could add a boinging sound effect, so I would look up spring or something. When he hits the ground about here, there, I'm going to slide my sound effect in and line it up with that little marker. Then I'm going to go to the next bounce, right about there, bring this one back in. Whoops, too far. And then I'll preview it. Okay, feels a little bit off. I think maybe just a frame back. All right, let me just set my work area here. There we go. Sufficient. All right. Maybe one of these, actually all of these are a bit too loud. I'll adjust that after. So then I would go to my next one. I would duplicate the first one. I move it up so it's in line with the rest of it. Oops, I think I skipped one, did I? 1, 2, nope, they're here. And then there's one more right there, so then I duplicate this one. And line that up. Oops. Good. Okay. The last one is maybe he doesn't bounce as much. So I'm just going to hit L and put that to -10. If you want preview audio, you hit the period key. That's good. So maybe this one I'll take down to -5. I'll hit the period key, or the thing on this, -2, there we go. All right. So the first jump is going to be the loudest, and then they're gradually going to get softer because he's not jumping as far. There we go. This seems to match pretty well. Now I want my ambient sound, so I'm going to drag my ambient sound down here. If I hit L twice, you'll see this sound effect is actually pretty long. It's a minute long. Like I said, I only need 10 seconds of it. So I'm going to go to about here. I'm going to set a keyframe for my audio levels. I'm going to go up to about 8 seconds and crank this down to about -20. I'm going to go to about here. Maybe set this to -10. There we go. So here's my sound. Now something good that Audition has in there, it already has built-in ins and outs. So I could basically just say fade this in, fade this out, and it's done. But I have to know that exact time that I want this to happen. So as long as I know I have 8 seconds, it's perfect. So that works. So then what I did, I needed to adjust this further, okay? So this is where you're going to get into composing and pre-composing and pre-composing and pre-composing. So I take my composition, which is BG05. I drag this to a new composition. This is everything flattened all together. I'm going to go to my levels, and I'm going to knock everything down to, let's say, -5. So this gives me a good way to control all of those volumes at the same time without having to go through and manually adjust each one. There we go. What else? It needs some finishing. This looks pretty not finished, right? On your computers, you have a thing called Magic Bullet. Again, just like before, you could download the trial version, use it at home, and then when you come here, you'll have the full-blown. I'm going to use this thing called Looks. It's a good way to see what is possible. If you work for a company, they may not have Looks, so you still would want to know how to do these things manually, but this is a good idea or a good way to get into, like, this is what the finished product should look like, and then you can kind of work backwards if you needed to figure that out. So the way that they work is there's a bunch of stuff here, scopes, and then there's a looks thing here. These are all different Instagram filters. Looks was out first. These are all different Instagram filters for changing the way that your stuff looks. Okay? So you can go through and just literally hover your mouse over any one of these and get different color corrections, adjustments to each one of them. So you can try to find, like, which way do I want this to look. Like, that one looks kind of decent. Maybe I'll adjust it. So centerpiece so far is the main winner. Actually, I kind of like that one, last word. So last word and centerpiece are the ties. Yeah, that's too much. All right. All right, I like pocketbook, centerpiece. All right, I think I'm going to go with centerpiece. You're the winner. Cool. All right, so once I have this, all the stuff down here, this is what makes that effect happen. So if I want to adjust it, it's simply a matter of clicking on it, and then you can adjust it. Now for this one, there's nothing there. It's just that. Same thing here. Okay, here's my lens vignette. So you can see where the edges are darkening. So if I drag this down, I can adjust where that vignette's happening. So if I really want to tighten it up so that the edges are really dark, I could do that. I could even move this around so it's more centered in one area or another if I'm trying to fake my lighting or whatever. Okay, I want it to be pretty subtle, so I'm going to let it be a little bit bigger. You can also play with the settings that are over here, so maybe I want to adjust the amount of the vignette, or the vignette, as some people like to call it. I don't know why. Here's my shoulder, which is just some of the adjustments for my coloring. Here's this one, and again, you don't have to know like everything that it does. It's pretty quick. Click and drag, see what it does. What does Mojo do? I have no idea what this one does. Look at that. Ooh. I like having more Mojo. That's too much Mojo. That's like an underwater scene. Just by playing with the color, you can see it looks like that. He's not underwater, though. He's a Spartan. That's cool. Let's see what Punch does. What does Bleach do? Nope, I think I like a little bit more Bleach in there. That's cool. And then this, you don't have to worry about that. You can play with the strength or change one of these if you want, but I think the one I had on there is probably good. Nope, that wasn't it. All right, and then when you're done, you just hit the check mark. And now those effects are on top of your thing. So before, when we did our vignette, we would duplicate the layer. We would put our own mask on it. We would set it to multiply, feather it. This way, everything is compact into that one thing. You can definitely do it the other way that I've shown before, but this way works a lot better because it's all locked within that. If I want to see what it looks like without it, I can turn it off, turn it back on. So you can see there's a huge difference in just kind of like what the finish of it looks like. Okay. Now, let's pretend that you did duplicate this. Keep in mind that you have audio on this layer and that layer. So if you have audio on 2 layers, it would actually sound twice as loud. Not fully, but good enough. Okay? Especially if you duplicated one of your sounds over and over and over again. I guess I can just get period. There we go. So you can see how loud it is now because I've duplicated it so many times. This is what it sounds like with just one. Okay? So just be aware that if you do duplicate a layer that has sound in it, that you have to get that sound off of there. On mine, there's 5. Nope, I want 3. Where are you at? Where are you at? Nope, nope, nope. Nope. There it is. On that video of the bird, this is the video of the bird. Let me just hit the audio. Did I turn that off? There it is. So I don't know why it's not filtering through the other one, but if I had that sound on and I wasn't paying attention to it, I never checked my sound, that would play. And then if you duplicated it, that would play a whole lot. So I just make sure the audio is off. There we go, number 6. Okay, click there, put my filter back on. Cool. And then I'm just going to make my comp longer. So this is 8 seconds, so let's make it 15. I've already imported my title card. I've already updated my title card. And so now all I have to do is zoom out, drag my title card down to here, scoot this over. And the way that my title card goes off the screen, I can pretty much line up my Angry Bird to be like right there. Okay? Now I don't want it to start until it's wiped. Okay? So I'm going to go to my time. I'm going to say enable timer mapping and just stretch this out. So that gets wiped, and then my Angry Bird starts moving. Okay, and then when I get to the end, I need something to happen here to get rid of my Angry Bird. So maybe I'll just throw on a transition. Let's do a grid wipe. All right, that's cool. All right, completion there. Yes, sir.
What if we wanted to make it so that it was a loop animation? Would we still be able to do that and add a second version of it where we and when we put the comp together along with a title card and add the transition to it then?
What do you mean a loop animation? So it starts and does it could do the same thing over and over again? Yeah, you're just going to show one of the clips. So you could have, for your own demo reel or whatever, you could show that it loops or could loop. End of my work area, make it a movie, and so on. The H.264 preset already has a pretty good audio thing picked. So when you go and you send this over to Media Encoder, you don't have to worry about picking anything else for audio. You just pick that H.264, give it a name, hit the go button, and let it go and do its thing. Make sure your stuff is organized. So like I said, my audio is inside audio. All my comps are inside here. All my movies are inside there. I have no sequences. I have plenty of solids. My textures. Oops. Should be in my textures folder, my stills folder down there. Okay, so I've saved all that stuff. As I've said before, definitely copy these to the desktop. Don't move them. Somebody already moved one of their projects to the desktop and lost it. So not in this class, in a different one. Delete the stuff that I don't need. I don't need any of this. I do need the artwork folder, so keep that. I do need the audio folder. Why is my movie in there? There's my movie. My reference is not there. I don't need this one. This is just random stuff. we go. So I can delete all that. And then that's what I'm turning in. I have my movie, I have my After Effects file, and then I have all my other stuff that I would need there. Cool? Questions? No? All right.